Good morning, everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to another one of our quarterly webinars. So we do this every quarter for all of our landlords, tenants, and even prospective landlords, anyone wanting to get into the real estate market from an investment perspective. Today, I'm joined by a couple of people in our team, both Jasmine and Justin. Jasmine is from our property management team, so she heads that for us. Justin's actually from our sales division. He does help out a little bit in the rental space. Jeet, who's our leasing officer, wasn't able to make it today. So we're going to have Justin on first. Justin, I know you're doing a lot of the sales side of things, but I wanted you to just jump on and give us a bit of an idea of any of the investors that you've got coming through, any of the open homes, and what the general consensus is there.
Yep. So Josh, just across our network, we've had an average of about 28 groups come through on the sales side. A small percentage have been investors, roughly about 18%. And we've been talking to these investors a lot, and a lot of them have been telling us they've been looking for location in terms of being close to transport and properties requiring minimal work that needs to be done. And the majority of them have had concerns around the changes to legislation around tenancies and whether tenants are going to be able to pay rent. So I've noticed that a bit. So Jasmine from our team will touch base on what we've been doing to ensure our clients get the best tenants and make sure they can get their rent paid on time. Overall, though, I've noticed there's been a pretty good appetite for investors in the marketplace. They seem to be getting financed relatively easily, considering the times. Most investors have already have one property, and therefore with a little bit of equity in the home, I've noticed the property. So funding finance in that space is a bit easier than we thought, and people can get a loan as long as they have a stable job, and maybe if they're not in like the industries such as like hospitality or travel, so something quite stable at this point. So look, if they're able to get finance, then mortgage repayments typically are pretty quite low at this point. And if you have a rental income coming through, it makes it that bit easier. So all in all, investors in the marketplace are quite strong.
Yeah, mate. Well, I appreciate you jumping on, filling in for Jeet. I know you're going to run to an appointment, so I'll let you get out of here. We'll kick on. Jazz, I want to try and share my screen and just talk about a couple of properties that we've actually leased quite recently. There's been some concerns from clients, and what my involvement is in the property management space is I'll generate any new business that comes in. So basically go and do the initial meeting with the client, talk about what we do as a business, and just generally sign up those properties. What I've been pitching quite heavily to a lot of our clients in the current conditions is that we want to make sure we look for a quality tenant rather than just quantity on the rent in terms of a really high price. So whilst we're here to actually maximize the value of your investment property, but we also want to be careful that we're not going to go and pitch too hard in terms of the actual asking price in properties that we've been pursuing. So just a couple of examples which you can see on screen. This property was down at 22 Angofra Place in Pennant Hills. It was actually on the market for sale. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the outcome that the owner was after, so they chose to rent out the property. I personally thought that we could probably get a rent around the sort of low 600s, maybe 620 or 630. But both the owner and I agreed that quality tenant was going to be more important. So we advertised this property at 600 a week, was on the market for just 5 days and ended up leasing it for 620. So got a little bit more than the actual asking price. Next property here was this one in Paling Street. This was a phenomenal outcome on the weekend. Jeet was absolutely run off his feet on this one. So we had about 29 groups come through this inspection. There's another property on the market in the complex for $595 per week. That had been on for 3 weeks. So when I had spoken to this owner, we thought the $595 was actually going to be achievable, but we decided to put it down at $580 to make sure that we focused on a really, really good quality tenant. Jeet's just joined us. Thanks for that. And what we did was the 29 groups came through. We had about 5 or 6 applications on that property and ended up getting $5 more for the owner, but making sure that we really, really focused on a good quality tenant. The last one was this townhouse in Thornley. This was probably our best outcome so far, and Jeet ran an amazing campaign on this. So one open home, I think we had another 25 to 30 groups come through that one, several applications. In the complex, most of the townhouses of a similar caliber had been renting around that 700 mark. We actually decided to market this property at 680 per week. We actually ended up getting 710 for this client. So what we've really been focusing on is making sure that we have these really, really good quality tenants coming through, making sure that we're focusing on job stability rather than just wanting to get a really, really high rent. So really finding that balance. We're finding that there are a couple of properties that are sitting on the market just a little bit longer. What we thought was going to be an attractive rent, unfortunately, hasn't been. So we needed to keep moving forward with trying to push those campaigns through. So that's been a couple of the sort of stories that we've had so far. Jazz, I wanted to sort of jump over to you to give us a bit of an idea on the property management space. You're talking about our routine inspections. How are you managing those inspections at the moment?
Yeah, so look, at the moment, there is no, I guess, legislation that's preventing, we're not in lockdown, so we're allowed to do routine inspections. We're allowed to go visit people in their homes. When an inspection is due, we always obviously touch base with the tenant and make sure that they are comfortable with us coming through their home. More often than not, at the moment, they are. But obviously we'll have a mask on, we'll make sure we're practicing physical distancing and not standing too close to them. So yeah, essentially it's fairly normal in that regard, but there have been, I guess, a handful of people who would prefer us not to attend their home, which is fine, more than understandable, better to be safe. But in that scenario, similar to how things were happening in lockdown beginning of the year, we would ask them to do a video call with us or via WhatsApp, or even just send through a property walkthrough that they've done themselves. Again, just really showing each nook and cranny in the property and making sure that they report any necessary repairs to us. And I guess getting it done digitally that way. That's not as common, but again, if someone isn't comfortable, we're not going to force our way into the property. Look, it's all temporary measures for the time being as well. So eventually things will all be normal, no doubt, but we just do what we can.
Yeah, that's right. Keep working through it. And you guys have done a phenomenal job with that. And that sort of takes me to how we're running our open homes as well. And even with tenanted properties, there's obviously, we have to err on the side of caution. Some tenants have been quite concerned with us doing inspections and stuff. And we're just having to manage that process and making sure we're, doing the social or the physical distancing, limiting the amount of people coming through inspections, shoes off, agents are wearing masks, we're helping people sanitize hands by having that available for them as well. And that's what some of the concerns have been for some of our landlords, is like, how are we actually going to show a property that's been tenanted? And there's been some challenges there, but we've been able to work around that. A lot of the video stuff has been really good. If we've got a tenant that doesn't want a group of people coming through their opens or through their property, essentially, we might do a video first that we send off to any other prospective tenants, just to say, hey, this is what the property looks like. Why don't you check this out first? Maybe drive past, make sure you're happy with the location. And that's been working really well, hasn't it?
It has. One of our recent rentals in Oakley Avenue in Thornley as well, we even had a few inquiries. I remember one lady, she'd just come back from quarantine and she couldn't quite make that Saturday open home, so she asked me to do a WhatsApp FaceTime with her and just take her through that way and show her the property that way, because she couldn't physically get there. I know that one was a little bit different because the property was vacant, but it really does work. And if there was a tenant living in that property, they would have felt more comfortable, knowing that we are taking those steps and we are just trying to reduce the amount of people at open homes. But I guess the other side of it is, one person per 4 square meters. Luckily, a lot of our properties are on the larger side. So when you do have 15 people coming through, trying to limit them and have them sort of come through one by one is good. But at least, there's enough space. It's not a small little like a granny flat or something in some scenarios.
Yeah, that's right. And even with those, Jeet has done an amazing job with managing those processes and just limiting the amount of people coming through. So all credit to him. With the market changing, we've actually been approached by a lot of people that have self-managed their properties, tenants not paying rent and not really understanding the process around that. we've created a bit of a PDF document that we can hand out to anyone to let them know as to what they should and shouldn't be doing, just to ensure that their properties are looked after the way they should be if they're managing it themselves. What's some things and advice that you can give to landlords maybe managing their own properties, and I think some potential changes that may have come through quite recently?
Yeah, so some changes that came through recently. Well, there was a reform obviously in March, which everyone would probably be well aware of by now. A landlord does have to provide their contact number and their, I guess, email address, essentially just to give the tenant a means of contacting them directly, even if the landlord has an agent.
Okay.
New changes that have come out recently, essentially if the landlord lives outside of New South Wales, they have to basically tell the tenants that they are living in another state or territory, or even if they're overseas, and they have to do this within 14 days of, I guess, a change of address or of signing the lease as well. Again, just to give the tenant information of who their landlord is, and just an option of contacting them. I suppose if something were to happen to the agent and they couldn't get in contact with the agent is my feeling why that's been brought about. But yeah, so essentially that's sort of new and been put in place. But in terms of landlords looking to manage their own properties, as you said, we do have a checklist that can help in terms of, you know, all the things to do, setting up and open homes and those sorts of things. So if we do want them sent out, we can send that across.
Yeah, beautiful. And so talk to us about the New South Wales government's come out with some changes to the moratorium that they put on evictions. So this happened at the start of COVID. The New South Wales government came out with a few things to, I guess you could look at as protecting tenants, which made sense in the view that loss of job and everything that came around that environment. You and I got heavily involved in putting some processes in place to look after our landlords and also look after tenants, but have a fair, I guess, view on things, that if a tenant needed a rent reduction or was requesting a rent reduction, that we went through a few different protocols to make sure that they were eligible for that. We'd spoken about this in previous webinars that we've done around getting people to, you know, fill out a form, people giving us proof that they've actually, whether it be loss of job or on JobKeeper or a sort of loss of income, whatever that may look like. And I think during that process, we really managed that quite well. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we didn't have any tenants actually be given any rent reductions. Was that right?
Didn't have any.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think we had any tenants.
No, that's right. We've had a good run, thankfully, with ours. But you're right. They did actually bring a 6-month extension with those, I guess, moratorium on evictions. So it'll be continuing on until March 2021 at this stage. Basically, landlords cannot prevent or cannot evict tenants who are undergoing financial hardship as a direct response to COVID. So as you said, we have those checklists in place to make sure that they can provide us the evidence that it, you know, the job loss or financial hardship is a direct result of COVID. So essentially that's going to continue going on for landlords until March next year. But you're right, thankfully we've had a good run and haven't had really any of those scenarios come to us. We're finding a lot of the new managements as well, any new listings, I suppose, you know, at open homes, many tenants might be looking out and saying, you know, I'm coming to rent this property because it's less than what my current rental is.
Yeah.
In which case, starting the lease, starting fresh there, in that sense, they're not going to need a rent reduction, because any sort of financial hardship they may have already experienced, they sort of have recalibrated and they know essentially what they can afford. So that's sort of the other side of things too for anyone looking for a new tenant at the moment.
Yeah, and I think what we've found between you and I and Jeet when we're renting out properties is that when we've advertised them slightly under market value, tenants are actually aware of that, and they do see that. And that's why we've got that heightened competition at a lot of our properties that we're leasing. And then in a couple of circumstances, you've had where we've had a tenant want to come to us and ask for the rent reduction back to them.
You there, Josh? I think something's just happened to his internet. Yeah, you were talking. Sorry, it just bumped out basically at the beginning of what you were saying about at open homes.
Lucky I remember everything I was talking about. No, I'm just joking. So I think as I was saying that we've been quite lucky where because we've had properties advertised slightly under market value, even when we've had tenants come back to us, even quite early on in their, I guess, application, in their leasing process, once they've just signed a lease, and they've asked for any rent reductions, we've actually gone back to them and said, well, here's some comparable rental properties. We actually advertise the property that you're leasing slightly under market value, knowing what's happening in the economy and ensuring that we go and get a really, really good quality tenant like yourself. So here's some of those comparables just to show you that we haven't actually gone and pushed the envelope too hard. And if you feel like you can't actually afford the rent, we'll do what we can to try and reduce that for you. We'll talk to the landlord, but you might want to consider that if you did need to move out of this property, here's some other similar properties that you'd be moving into, and the fact that those would be a little bit higher on rent. So you're actually got a pretty good deal where you are. And that's why I've really been pushing to my clients that let's advertise it at a really, really good, attractive rent. So we don't have need to have those conversations with tenants, which has essentially helped you as well, because there's a lot of putting out of fires in the current environment now, plus you're trying to manage property as well. And we've already had some landlords come over to us and say, well, our agent's not doing what they should do. They're probably quite busy. And I understand why. You know, you haven't just got the repair side of it, you got like rent reductions and the issues with getting access. So we've had a couple of landlords come over to us for that reason, from what I've spoken to you about.
Definitely. But no, it has been effective to put it under that market value and keep tenants sort of, like you said, get a good tenant at a fair price and keep things fair at this time when everything's a bit difficult for everyone. You know, we're all on the same boat. So
definitely. And like touching on the sales side of things, if there's anyone out there looking to actually go and invest in property, what we're finding at the moment is the sales market is very, very strong. We only see that going from strength to strength. There's talks of the government removing responsible lending laws, which is going to allow banks to give out money a little bit more freely. We've got really, really low interest rates, as Justin touched on when he was chatting to us. So it's actually a really, really good environment around investing. There are a lot of investors concerned that tenants aren't going to be paying rent, but I'm confident with our formula that we've been running, and that's been proof in 5 properties that we've, I think it was an average of 6 days on the market, and 4 out of 5 achieved above the actual asking rent. So I'm confident in that space we're going to be able to get people some good results. So if anyone is looking out there to invest, we've got our Landlords First program as well, where any of our landlords will receive properties before they go to market, any high investment grade properties essentially, and we can get those off to you first. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we hadn't spoken about?
I believe you covered it very well. We both did.
Good stuff. Well, thank you to all of our current landlords at the moment. If there's anyone out there that wants to have a conversation, if you're managing your property yourself, or if another agent's handling it, we can go and review the rent for you, have a look at your agreement, see if there's anything we can do in that regard. Until next quarter, we appreciate everyone tuning in. We will have a recording of this sent out to everyone. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to get in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. See you later.